Where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're
the failure
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 p.m. I'm Charlie Peters. Tonight,
I want England to believe that again, because you guys brought Christianity to so much of the world. I want the Church of England to get its mojo back.
devastating news coming out of the United States as Trump ally and conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has died after being shot at a university. President Trump announced his death on Truth Social, paying tribute to Kirk by saying no one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all. Now, flags across the United States have been ordered to fly at half-mast, including at the White House, where we have seen flags lowered. On my panel tonight, I'll have the Director for Popular Conservatism, Mark Littlewood, GB News contributor Stephen Allen, and the journalist and broadcaster Nina Miskov. Now, some breaking news. We're rolling tonight. The US conservative influencer Charlie Kirk has been shot dead at an event at Utah Valley University. We can show you footage from the university now of the moment after the shots were fired. Now, Charlie Kirk is one of the biggest conservative influencers in the United States today. He's spoken at Republican conventions, and last year Donald Trump gave a significant speech at a Turning Point conference in Arizona. Kirk is married to a former Miss Arizona with whom he had 2 children. Utah Valley University has released a statement saying that a single shot was fired on campus toward a visiting speaker. We understand that shot was fired from around 200 yards away from where Charlie Kirk was sitting. Well, I want to bring in my panel for their reaction to this appalling breaking news tonight. We've had tributes paid from across the political spectrum around the world, from Benjamin Netanyahu all the way to the Foreign Secretary in the United Kingdom, Yvette Cooper, Mark. And that just goes to show how influential and vital a figure Charlie Kirk was.
Oh, yeah, completely. We've touched on, as of your correspondents from Washington, Charlie, have touched on, look, he wasn't a household name in the UK. He probably will be now. But in terms of the key people in American politics over the last 4 or 6 years, he is unambiguously one of them. You know, I'm not going to say because of this tragedy that Trump's victory in 2024 was entirely down to him, but he was one of the key influencers that made the Republican victory possible. And, yeah, I mean, a number of people were talking about him as a president in the future. I don't think that was implausible at all. So it's an unbelievable tragedy. After 10, 12 years of incredible influence, to be cut down at the age of 31, absolutely Gutting.
Mark, before I bring in the other two panellists, I just want to bring our audience another eyewitness account from Utah Valley University this evening. We've had a lot of people speaking about what they witnessed. Let's bring another one for you right now.
I was going to an AI event, AI for Business, and that's when I heard all these screams. They said there were gunshots by the Charlie Kirk event. I ran off campus. It was terrifying, and that's crazy because I was looking up. I'd watched Charlie Kirk on YouTube a few times. He had these controversial things, but that's no excuse for gun violence, and I don't agree. I hate guns, honestly. So. Yeah, it's traumatizing. It's traumatizing for the students. When I saw students running off from the campus over the bridge there, a lot of them were crying. It was traumatizing for everyone. And now the campus is closed. So
the reaction there, that obviously, that eyewitness there immediately pointing out that this is basically a strike on free speech there.
Well, as I say, we don't know yet whether this is. I mean, it looks very like it.
OK, but come on, he's giving a speech, he's giving a political speech at a gathering, and he's been shot dead. Regardless of who the motivation was, that is a strike on free speech.
I agree.
Yes?
I said nothing else but the last 2 hours, that it is a tragedy, that he was obviously an extraordinary young man, and that it goes to prove how divisive politics has become in America and increasingly around the world, and how free speech in every way is a precious thing and must be preserved. And violence has no place in our society, and the ballot box has to remain the way that we change things. And debate and talking. I mean, I have been able to speak my mind, whatever idiot stuff it comes out with, very happily for decades, and you would hope that would continue for everybody.
Right, but it hasn't happened for a lot of people, clearly, and after this tragic event, that's been reaffirmed. And you say that, violence has no place in society, but Stephen Allen, what we're seeing tonight is that, unfortunately, it does, and particularly if you are strident and a public commentator on difficult issues.
Yeah, it's not just what he said, it's the fact that he said it well that seems to be part of this. Doesn't look, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, you should be furious about this for the very reason of silencing, because without debate you've got nothing. If all you want to do is live in a world where you listen to people who already agree with you, what a waste of a life. And this is the kind of thing that's going to be shut down by what we're hearing tonight. So yes, human tragedy. If you can't see that and you're posting stuff on social media, you can't see this as a man and a father, you should take a good long hard look at yourself.
Too right.
But the idea that you would silence someone instead of engaging in debate. If ever there's someone that you could debate, if you think you're on the right side of the debate, go off, learn some facts and debate him. He gave you the chance. But instead, they silence voices through violence. And the thing that really bothers me is universities they're associated with saying, you can't say that because words are violent. Words aren't violent, are they, in comparison to the lesson we've learned tonight? I tell you what is violent, shooting someone. That needs to be paid attention.
No problem is ever solved by violence. If you look at the wars around the world, the only way they stop is through people talking.
Yeah. And he offered that chance. He was debating with... I used to love his videos, and it's not as if I'm likely to agree with everything he said. And that's why I love them. It's something fascinating about debate.
It's more than just the censorious effect of a public speaker being shot in the neck. That's going to have a stifling effect on how these people feel confident to have discussions. But also, we have to stress, there's an active manhunt taking place right now.
Yeah.
It's not just the fear that someone might come for you, but it's all the infrastructure that goes around these events now will be especially difficult to organise, Mark Littlewood, because people will be thinking, what's the insurance going to be like? Do I need to tell the FBI I'm going to give a speech and host a discussion on contentious issues? Is that going to happen in Britain as well?
Well, I mean, God only knows, Charlie, but, I mean, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? As I was saying earlier, it's sort of practical to police senators and vice presidents and presidents that, you don't always get it right, but at least you've got a fair fist to try to protect them. What are we going to do if this is a risk associated with being outspoken about your political opinions at a university event in America? It's nightmarish. And that's what makes this death, I think, rather different to a whole range of political assassinations we've seen over the generations in America. This guy was not a politician. He was just someone with an opinion who happened to be very influential.
Yes, but he was seen as a politician.
Well,
really, don't you think?
Well, wrongly,
but so closely allied.
What does that mean?
No, but
what's the relevance?
No. Well, Mark said you've seen politicians being gunned down in the past, but you haven't seen people who are activists, and I'm saying that he's regarded almost as a politician.
His only power was the power of influence.
I agree. No, but he obviously had the ear of Trump, and therefore was so closely allied. So therefore was seen, and as you say, was being talked of as a future president, perhaps. So seen as a political figure and not just an activist.
I don't think it's about how similar he may have been to a politician. It's the fact that he was in the sphere where emotions were leading. He was influential and successful on social media, and that's where upset happens, isn't it? That's why I love watching him.
Exactly what I was saying before about social media.
OK, Nina Miskov, Stephen Allen, Mark Leatherwood, stay with me, but I'm going to cross back to Washington, D.C. to join GB News presenter Bev Turner. Bev, this is an active manhunt. We still don't have a suspect in custody. Federal agents are on the ground. And as that manhunt continues, the number of tributes being paid to Charlie Kirk on gbnews.com/your say, I've never seen anything like it. The flurry of tributes and sympathies being poured out for this man is just astonishing.
And in fact, he isn't really a household name in the UK. You know, if you ask my parents who was Charlie Kirk, they would have no idea. But it just shows the difference now between those powerful voices online, radical, maverick, individual voices, and what we might call establishment media. And I think GB News sits squarely, actually, where we are unique in the fact that we sort of straddle those two audiences, and we appeal to people who want to hear every single side of every single debate. And Charlie Kirk has become this kind of talismanic figure, actually, for free speech and the right, as we might use that old-fashioned term. I think we need to come up with something that's more relevant, actually, in 2025, because he was a proudly small c conservative, if you like, proudly a Christian, a family man. For anyone that's tuning in who isn't familiar with Charlie Kirk, he would host these sort of pop-up events at university campuses where he would sit under a little gazebo and he would take people on, and he would beg for students to come up, and there'd be a huge queue of people that were prepared to take him on particular issues, and these videos would get clipped up online and would get watched by millions of people around the world. Charlie himself was followed by probably 10, 20 million people that were following him alone. He was an industry. He had a whole team of people behind him. And as you've seen from the reaction of the Republican Party tonight, and particularly the president, it's Donald Trump, who announced his death on social media. He was a trailblazer for people who wanted to get what you might call old-fashioned traditional attitudes. The idea that somebody couldn't change their gender. There's an eyewitness account that I've watched this evening from a young girl who was there, who was sobbing, who said the issue they were actually talking about at the time when the shot was fired was about transgender gun violence. That's been a big issue here in America because there's been a disproportionate number of school shootings carried out by transgender people. And she said it was almost as though she felt it was a cue when whoever he was debating with mentioned shooting, that the gunshot rang out. So we have to think about as well, though, how we've got here, Charlie. Like, how have we got to a point where we are debating the death of a man because of his opinions? And this started, I would say, with Brexit, was the first big divisive issues where families even couldn't talk about it across a dinner table without it depicting one or another as a good person or a bad person. And then, of course, during the pandemic from spring 2020, that went on steroids. And we are still in the aftermath of that ripple effect of what you can and can't say has brought us to this point in 2025. And I'm sorry, but it's a bit rich to hear Nina Miskov, who was one of the people who was the most bullying to me on TV, on national TV, who sat in a studio with me and demanded to know if I'd taken the COVID vaccine. And the implication was that would make me a good or a bad person. Well, guess what? That attitude is leading us to today, where the entrenchment of views, where we are supposed to do away with nuance, we do away with any sort of ability to have a conversation, to shake hands with the person and say, I don't agree with you necessarily, but I still respect your opinion. That got flushed away in 2020. I was cancelled, I was censored, I was told I was a bad person, I was going to kill grandma because of the position that I was taking. And so I'd like to hear people like Nina Mishkov just admit that at some stage during the last 5 years, they played a part in the fact that we've got to the point now where free speech is considered dangerous because it has become left versus right. I never cast myself as left or right. I still actually don't to this day. I see myself as very apolitical in terms of party allegiances. But we've got to the point where people are literally being killed because of their views. Charlie.
OK, Bev, we'll obviously bring back Nina and speak to her after you've made a series of sort of accusations and comments towards her. But while I've got you, I just want to bring up a statement from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying, "My thoughts this evening are with the loved ones of Charlie Kirk. It is heartbreaking that a young family has been robbed of a father and a husband. We must all be free to debate openly and freely without fear. There can be no justification for political violence." And, Bev, that's a really key point, isn't it, to discuss what the Prime Minister's said just there, because this isn't just happening in the United States. People have this fear about free speech leading to violence right across the world, and increasingly here in the United Kingdom as well.
But again, how dare he? How dare the Prime Minister come out and say that we should all be free to say what we think without the fear of violence? Well, I would say locking people up is a form of violence for their opinions. It's all very well for Keir Starmer to come out and tell us he believes in free speech. Well, don't tell us one thing and then do the polar opposite, because it's frightening for people. It's frightening for the British public when you feel like you've got a leader who you can't trust. You can't predict what he's going to do when he says one thing. That is the difference between the UK and the country that I am sat in right now, because you know that Donald Trump is talking about free speech and he's acting on it as well. And yet over in the UK, we've got this really unsettling situation where the leader of the country is untrustworthy and scares us because we don't feel free to say what we want to say in case we get that knock on the door.
OK, Bev Turner, thank you very much. I think, you raise an interesting point. You say, the United States can teach us so much about free speech, but a lot of the big coverage in the United States, of course, before tonight's, shocking stories and shocking outcomes in Utah was that a lot of American media were cowed away from covering the killing of that Ukrainian refugee in Charlotte. People were very nervous about that. I think America has just as much to learn about free speech as we do in Britain and as many people do around the world. It's not necessarily that shining beacon of free speech as many people put it. But let's cross now elsewhere in Washington, D.C. to GB News presenter Ben Leo. Ben, now, the tributes being paid towards Charlie Kirk continue to roll in. You've just heard that statement from Sir Keir Starmer, and also we've heard from Barack Obama pointing out we don't yet know who is behind or what is behind this shooting. But the fact that it was one shot 200 yards away at a political event, really an astonishing moment, and it points to what is likely an assassination on Charlie Kirk for his political speech.
Yeah, of course, Charlie. It's not been confirmed yet what the motivation was, but you don't know it's raining outside. And as you said, the depth and breadth of tributes for Charlie Kirk from people all across the political spectrum just proves what a titan of a young man he was. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, Yvette Cooper tweeting in the last couple of moments as well. And I just want to reiterate again, yes, he was a political activist, a political commentator, long credited with actually getting Donald Trump elected in November for galvanising the youth vote across America. But let's not forget as well, he was behind that persona. He was a human being and a father of two very young children. He was a loving husband as well. And you would have seen when you just came to me now, there's a dark cloud over the US Capitol here in Washington, D.C. Well, let me tell you, it's a dark day for democracy in the United States as well. Charlie was also known as a devout Christian, a God-loving and God-fearing man who spread the message of Jesus far and wide. And actually, I've just been speaking to a chap here in the US who was casting here live from America, who has been shocked by the death of Charlie Kirk, and his name is Cody. He's with me now. Cody, good evening. Thank you for joining me. You were saying that your pastor back in Indiana was familiar with Charlie. His right-hand man, you described it, from a faith, from a Christian sense.
Yeah, my pastor back home, he was on Turning Point USA. He worked for them. Charlie, of course, that was his organization. And so Pastor Lucas Miles, I mean, he talked to him, I would say probably at least once a week. And I have a personal connection with my pastor, and I can only imagine what's going through my pastor's heart right now. I mean, he knew him as a friend. And I just got out of a prayer meeting, actually. It wasn't for Charlie Kirk, and we were all like, what? Why would this happen?
In terms of Charlie's faith, his Christian faith, his love for Jesus Christ, what did he do for Christianity in America?
Oh my gosh, he gave people a sense of boldness to speak out, because, you know, depending on where you're at, people want to push down your voice or say it's not politically correct. And Charlie Kirk, he was just past that point. Even for politics, yes, but even in his faith, he never backed down to share where he was at.
And your reaction to how America looks from here forward, because I said to our viewers earlier tonight, Charlie Kirk tweeted less than 24 hours ago a very sad image of the young Ukrainian girl who was murdered on that train in North Carolina, the Ukrainian girl, and he captioned it simply, America will never be the same. Will America ever be the same tonight after the death of Charlie?
You know, America, and I would say Charlie Kirk would say this, that we need Jesus going forward. And I think that that's what Charlie would say. So I'm just going to say that sentiment. That's the only way we can move forward.
Cody, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate your time and company.
Thank you
very much. Charlie, the reaction on the ground here in the US, the atmosphere is of shock, of sadness. When it was announced earlier that Charlie Kirk had been shot and it wasn't confirmed that he'd yet died, I watched the videos doing the rounds online of his death, the single shot to his neck, and I can say it now because unfortunately the worst has happened. But Charlie, speaking to you as a person from a military background, there was just no way he was going to survive that shot, and it's terrifying that the gunman still hasn't been caught. There are students at the university in Utah who are being given police escorts home because the gunman is still, as we understand up until this point, on the loose. And I'll just say before I hand back to you again, Charlie, that my thoughts and prayers are with Charlie Kirk's young children, his wife Erica, and his family here in the United States.
Ben Leo live in Washington, D.C., providing a moving tribute, as we'd expect, to a conservative commentator and activist he knew well. And back in the studio here, I'm joined by GB News contributor Stephen Allen. We've got the broadcaster and journalist Nina Miskoff, and we've got Mark Littlewood from Popular Conservatives. And Mark, you're just hearing more reaction there in D.C. to Charlie Kirk, but I think this is going to be a bit like the Je suis Charlie, the Charlie Hebdo shootings in Paris. I think very quickly the reaction to this attack, like the one on Salman Rushdie, and you know, more recently, this is going to expand beyond the incident into a wider reappraisal of how we appreciate free speech and how we deal with political violence around the world.
I hope you're right about that second point. I hope you're not right about the first point. The Je suis Charlie thing, after the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, was almost entirely performative. It didn't move the dial on free speech at all.
The game's changing now, don't you think?
Well, I agree, so I hope it's not like that. I hope this really is
there are so many more
pivot
voices
in the road, and we don't just get politicians mouthing memes and saying how terrible it is, that we actually get a shift in direction such that we get back to a free speech society, away from the you can't say that culture, and towards accepting that lots of people have lots of different opinions. It doesn't particularly matter if those opinions are offensive. They need to be tested in the public domain. And we haven't taken that path yet. And if Charlie Kirk's apparent assassination tonight, allows politicians across the West not just to say that, but to do it, then perhaps he hasn't died in vain. But politicians, I think, of all stripes have talked the talk on freedom of speech, but have not walked the walk.
And Stephen Allen, look, there are so many more political voices now. That's the difference, I think, between this appalling incident tonight, we're still digesting this horrible news from Utah, and 10 or so years ago, the Charlie Hebdo shootings in Paris. I think speech felt more contained even just a decade ago without the explosion of social media. There are more avenues to share your views now.
I again hope you're right, but I think we might be sitting in a bit of an echo chamber there. If you look on social media right now, all the right sounds are being made on X. I'm sure if you look at Truth Social, they're there. But I just had a little look at Blue Sky, and some of the responses have been terrible, and those minds aren't going to be changing. The only time free speech is worth defending is when it's someone saying something you disagree with. Otherwise, of course, you agree with someone being free to say it. And the kind of people who disagree with what Charlie used to say, I'm not seeing tons of sympathy, other than from the politicians who, of course, they all have to do that. Every Labour politician's going to have a tweet written for them and sent out. But on social media right now, some minds haven't been moved. I know it's really early days, and maybe there will be a discussion about it. I think the discussion about it will only be appreciated by those who already agree.
Yeah. And Nina Miskov, we're speaking to Bev Turner down the line there in Washington, D.C. And she was telling us that she wants this to be a moment, sort of reappraisal, people to sit back and sort of reflect on how they have engaged in free speech. She sort of called you out. She named you directly as someone who might not have been doing that, attacking her over her stance on vaccines, for example, during the pandemic. What's your reaction to what Bev Turner's had to say tonight?
Well, I couldn't hear absolutely everything she said because the sound in the studio is not good. But I remember exactly the incident. It was on the Jeremy Vine show, and we were perfectly... There was no debate. It's a debate programme. I didn't cut down free speech. I merely inquired of her whether she had which vaccine she had, and then asked her when she was talking about her views whether she was an epidemiologist or a virologist, because she was making out, as far as I can... And this is awful that we should be discussing this when this is not the topic tonight. And so, therefore, I'm not going to say any more than that. There was plenty of discussion. I am very surprised that Beverly has been unprofessional enough to bring this up, to make this about her and some slight from 5 years or so ago, and when she should be doing her job. And I can only think it's perhaps the setting up of GB News in America, and she's overtired and she needs a bit of a lie down in a darkened room. Okay. And let's leave it at that.
OK, Nina. Well, I think Bev Turner can fight for herself. Mark Littlewood, look, you've heard what Nina's got to say about what she thinks about the free speech situation, especially with what Bev Turner's had to say. But I think, you know, what Bev is definitely right on, as far as I'm concerned, is that COVID was a censorious moment. No. And, you know, Nina, you might not like the fact that she's named you in this and had a bit of a row with you.
There's no question of don't mind.
Finish my question, whether you like it or not. But the point is that in moments like this, when someone has been shot in the neck while giving a speech, their minds turn to other moments of censoriousness. Yeah, we have these moments we all sort of open up and think, that was wrong, hang on, have we let this go too far? I think that's what's happening again here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's why I said that you know, there's two elements here. One is actually about the law and what you can freely say without having PC Plod knocking on your door or going to prison, and where exactly you draw that line. And I think we have not drawn that line in the right position. There's clearly some things that should lead to the police knocking at your door, but we seem to be including far too many in the subset of speech that involves the police and the courts. But the second thing is a cultural thing. It's not actually to do with saying, if you say that, you'll be locked up or the police will come round and threaten you. It's a cultural sense of people saying, the general meme of our debate being, you can't say that. It's wrong to say that. If you say that, that's offensive, rather than actually engaging in the issues. I'm not accusing Nina of that, by the way.
No, I didn't do that at all.
I've got to go up. We're going to go to Utah now. I've got to cross there live, where the governor is speaking in Utah.
We're from Utah Valley University Vice President Val Peterson, who's been in touch with President Jimenez, and then we'll hear from Governor Cox. I'll turn the time over to Commissioner Mason. Hello, everyone. I'm Bo Mason, Commissioner for the Utah Department of Public Safety. Today at approximately 12:20 Mountain Standard Time, political influencer Charlie Kirk was shot in an event at the Utah Valley University. He was taken by private vehicle to Timpanogos Hospital, where he later passed. The Utah Department of Public Safety will be co-leading this criminal investigation to find this killer, along with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We are working in unison with the County Sheriff's Office, the local police department, and the University Police Department, all of which have been very cooperative and fully engaged in this process. Shortly after the shooting, we did have a suspect in custody, George Zinn, but he was released from custody after we identified that he did not match the shooting suspect and was not an accurate person of interest. However, he has been booked into the county jail by Utah Valley University Police Department for obstruction of justice. We do still have an active investigation for the person of interest. This incident occurred with a large crowd around. There was one shot fired and one victim. While the suspect is at large, we believe this was a targeted attack towards one individual. This is a tragic moment in our state and in our country. As we heal, we encourage everyone who is struggling with news of the incident to call 988, our state mental health crisis line. In addition to that, our partners with the FBI will also be discussing other ways we can communicate through the public for tips and other information. Thank you.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the FBI, we extend our sincerest condolences to the family and friends of Charlie Kirk. Our thoughts are also with the people who witnessed this traumatic event. We know that what you experienced was very difficult. Our thoughts are with you as well. As soon as we heard about the shooting, special agents and personnel from the Salt Lake Field Office responded immediately. We have full resources devoted to this investigation, including tactical, operational, investigative, and intelligence. To be clear, the FBI will fully support and co-lead this investigation alongside with our partners. We are working on setting up a digital media tip line, and as soon as it's established, we'll get that information out to everyone. I know there's a lot of questions. This is very much an active case, and this investigation is in its early stages. We are following all the leads and all the evidence. If anyone has any information, please report it to the FBI or local law enforcement. Thank you.
On behalf of President Tumenez, who we've been communicating with, and she's on her way back right now, I say that on behalf of Utah Valley University, we are shocked and saddened by the tragic passing of Charlie Kirk. We express our sincere condolences to the Kirk family. We grieve with our students, faculty, and staff who bore witness to this unspeakable tragedy. He was invited by the student group Turning Point USA to speak on our campus. We firmly believe that UVU is a place to share ideas and to debate openly and respectfully. Any attempt to infringe on those rights has no place here. We do not condone any form of violence at UVU and seek to make our campus a safe place for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this dark and tragic occasion. I want to thank our law enforcement officers who are leading this investigation, starting with Chief Long and his response here with the UVU Police Department. We're grateful for your leadership and your team. And again, to the speakers that you've just heard from who are co-leading this investigation. I also want to recognize Sheriff Mike Smith, who has been an invaluable partner as this investigation moves forward. I've been in touch with President Trump, with FBI Director Kash Patel. We are completely aligned with our state and federal partners as we work through this case. Now, this is a dark day for our state. It's a tragic day for our nation. And I want to be very clear that this is a political assassination. We are celebrating 250 years of the founding of this great nation. That founding document, the Declaration of Independence, that this great experiment on which we embarked together 250 years ago, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. The first one of those is life. And today, a life was taken Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a dad to 2 young children. He was also very much politically involved, and that's why he was here on campus. Charlie believed in the power of free speech and debate to shape ideas and to persuade people. Historically, our university campuses in this nation and here in the state of Utah have been the place where truth and ideas are formulated and debated. And that's what he does. He comes on college campuses and he debates. That is foundational to the formation of our country, to our most basic constitutional rights. And when someone takes the life of a person because of their ideas or their ideals, then that very constitutional foundation is threatened. Now, we have a person of interest in custody. The investigation is ongoing. But I want to make it crystal clear right now, to whoever did this, we will find you. We will try you. And we will hold you accountable to the furthest extent of the law. And I just want to remind people that we still have the death penalty here in the state of Utah. Our nation is broken. We've had political assassinations recently in Minnesota. We had an attempted assassination on the governor of Pennsylvania. And we had an attempted assassination on a presidential candidate and former president of the United States, and now current president of the United States. Nothing I say can unite us as a country. Nothing I can say right now can fix what is broken. Nothing I can say can bring back Charlie Kirk. Our hearts are broken. We mourn with his wife, his children, his family, his friends. We mourn as a nation. If anyone in the sound of my voice celebrated even a little bit at the news of this shooting, I would beg you to look in the mirror and to see if you can find a better angel in there somewhere. I don't care what his politics are. I care that he was an American. We desperately need our country. We desperately need leaders in our country. But more than the leaders, we just need every single person in this country to think about where we are and where we want to be. To ask ourselves, is this it? Is this what 250 years has wrought on us? I pray that that's not the case. I pray that those who hated what Charlie Kirk stood for will put down their social media and their pens and pray for his family, and that all of us will try to find a way to stop hating our fellow Americans. With that, we're happy to take a few questions.
The FBI director is posting that a suspect is in custody. I would just like clarification. Do you or do you not have a suspected shooter in custody?
We have a person of interest in custody that is being interviewed right now.
That is not George Zinn.
That is not George Zinn. Okay. That is correct.
Is there any
still searching
or
looking for another shooter or anybody else related to this?
Yes, we are actively looking for anyone and everyone who has any possible information relating to the shooting.
Can you tell us details about the suspect being taken into custody? Where? How long ago?
We cannot at this point. but we will get you that information when we can.
Is there believed to be a second individual involved in the shooting?
At this point, there is no information that would lead us to believe that there is a second person involved.
Can you guys talk about the possible shooter?
Do you want to talk about what we know there?
Yeah. The only information we have on the suspect, the possible shooter, is taken from closed-circuit TV here on campus. We do have that. We're analyzing it, but it is security camera footage, so you can kind of guess what the quality of that is. But we do know dressed in all dark clothing, but we don't have a much better description other than that.
Where do you believe the shot came from?
The shot came from here on campus, from a location at a potentially from a roof. Yes, a longer distance shot from a roof.
So to clarify, with the security camera footage you have and the person of interest that's in custody, does that match up?
That's what we're trying to decipher right now.
So did FBI or DHS have anything on the threat board this morning?
I can't speak.
I'll just say that the investigation is ongoing, and as soon as we have further information, we will be sure to release it.
Any indications of foreign intelligence involvement?
As of now, I can't comment on any of that.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the security of the event itself? Who was there security-wise, and what happens on these kind of events?
Chief Long.
So my name is Jeff Long. I'm the police chief here at UVU, and I'll tell you right now, we're devastated. We're a small police department. We have a very large campus. We have over 40,000 students, and we love our students. We love our visitors, and we're devastated by what happened today. This is the police chief's nightmare. I'm very saddened for the Kirk family. I know his wife and parents found out about this. You know, obviously he's away from home. He's here in Utah. They find out by a police officer that visits their home. That's tragic. Nobody wants that. But I can tell you about our venue today. This was an open venue. This was outside. We did have 6 officers working that event. We had probably over 3,000 people that were in attendance. It sat down in kind of a bowl area here on the central campus. We have a waterfall area, and so he was kind of in a lower area, surrounded by buildings. We had some plainclothes police officers that were in the crowd as well. We train for these things, and you think you have things covered, and these things. Unfortunately, they happen. You try to get your bases covered, and unfortunately today we didn't. And because of that, we had this tragic incident. So we did have officers there. We had Charlie Kirk's team. He has a security team that travels with him, and they were here with him when he was shot.
Was the gun recovered?
I'm sorry. See.
Was the weapon recovered?
At this point, I can't disclose that.
When Charlie Kirk was shot, there was a question being asked about mass shooting. Was that person apprehended, and do you know who asked that question?
Say the question again. I don't know if I understand what you're saying.
When Charlie Kirk was shot, he was answering a question about mass shootings specifically. Was that person apprehended, and do you know who asked that question?
I do not. We do not have that at this moment.
What kind of weapon was used?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for just one more question, so thank you.
Yeah, a question for the chief as well. Was it your team or Kirk's team or a combination of both that kind of set the security protocol for the event?
So we work together. He has his team, and they do this all over the country. We all know that. This is not uncommon for them. They're very comfortable on campuses, and I was coordinating with his lead security guy, and so yeah, we were working together.
Was this a sharpshooter type shot?
Ladies and gentlemen, those are all the questions that will be answered today. Again, thank you for covering this. We will be updating you as soon as we have additional information through normal channels, working with law enforcement. Again, our deepest condolences to the Kirk family and to the students who were there today. I would just ask everyone everywhere to please pray for their family and to pray for our country. We need it now more than ever. Thank you.
Well, so much information in that press conference there, panel, but interesting question just at the end. When Charlie Kirk was shot. He was answering a question about mass shootings specifically, and is the person who asked that question in custody? We didn't get confirmation of that, but it's highly unlikely they are, because the FBI has said moments ago that only one person is custody. And then we also heard from the governor, Spencer Cox, giving quite an impassioned speech about free speech in the United States, saying this is a dark day for our state, saying that free speech is foundational to the formation of our country. And when someone takes the life of a person because of their ideals, that constitutional foundation is threatened. They confirmed that they had a person of interest in custody, but there was another question mark about whether that person in custody matched the description of the person they described in the CCTV footage. So we have someone in custody now. It's a breaking news update, Mark.
Yes, and it's also worth saying Spencer Cox there also was quite clear this was a political assassination. Those are the words of the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox. Look, we're obviously trying to put the building blocks together and reach a reasonable conclusion. Let's hope they've got the shooter in custody and that he can be charged and face the full force of the law. The governor of Utah also reminded us that Utah has the death penalty, by the way.
Yes.
But there's a long way to go till we get to that. It's a political assassination. They've got someone. They weren't being completely clear yet about it. Obviously, they're going to take their time. They're not going to rush to judgment. I thought that was a pretty good and sound remarks by the governor, but there's still a few questions around all of this, aren't they? Are they absolutely sure they've got the guy? Because at the time of the shoot, you would have thought if they picked him up there and then, we would have known this 2 or 3 hours ago. So they're not clear where they caught him, and I was worried they hadn't caught him at the scene. Have they caught somebody else who might be involved in it but isn't the shooter? Those are just some of the questions I've still got.
And Mark, they did say they were actively seeking any more information about it. Stephen Allen, we've got Turning Point UK. OK, so the activist group that Charlie Kirk founded and ran in Britain, taking a swipe at the Labour government, saying that ministers there, including now the Deputy Prime Minister, they're alleging David Lammy described Turning Point and Charlie Kirk as sinister forces and xenophobic. They're being very sharp and directly critical just now in the last 10 minutes or so, at the same time as officers are trying to apprehend this suspect. It just goes to show that this is a very tense political atmosphere.
Yeah, and this is why I'm not incredibly sure that this will be the moment that takes down the temperature in the political debate. It's interesting, yeah, they said about having a person of interest, but then his next sentence was saying, we will find you, we will prosecute you. That makes me think they're still very much looking. The person of interest is not the person they think who actually did it. I mean, I suppose that story there is, you're telling me David Lammy might have said something that, looking back on it, comes across as a bit stupid. Shocker, hold the front page. It's not the first time he's done that, someone who described the president as a Nazi, didn't he? But, yeah, this is clearly, it's good that it was called a political assassination. I was just looking on social media again, looking at the other side, the one that we're not sat in, you know, the blue sky, where they are just saying some unbelievable stuff. Someone posted saying it wasn't political violence, it was gun violence. You just want to hold your hands in your head and go like, the two things can be... A gun was used, it doesn't mean that it can't be political. This clearly has to be political, because look who we're talking about. The different levels, whether it's a conspiratorial level of political, whether it's ideological, or whether it's just someone was famous for being outspoken politically and caught the eye of some deranged person with a gun. Either way, this is about his politics.
Nina Miskoff, what was your reaction to Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, his speech there, in particular, how he said that we desperately needed our country and our leaders. We just need every single person in this country now to sort of promote that Charlie Kirk, I don't care what his politics are, I cared that he was an American.
Yes, and I thought it was a very, very impressive speech, and he was obviously very, very moved by the occasion, by the tragic occasion, and he you know, sometimes people can rise to the occasion or not, and he rose to the occasion with this, and you can see why, you know, he's the governor. But he's quite right in that, as I said, I've been saying all evening, America is a very divided country, and the atmosphere is very tense. It's a violent country, and it's all exacerbated by social media.
I just don't buy this. I'm sorry.
No,
because
I'm
sorry, we've got to leave it there because we're going to go back to Washington, D.C. because we're joined by GB News presenter Bev Turner,
about freedom
who
of
is also
speech?
joined by Tom Lobianco, who is the editor of 24 Site News. Bev, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie. You can let Nina know I don't need to lie down, actually. I'm perfectly all right. Tom Lobianco is here with me in the studio, as you say. Now, Tom, you've hot-footed it here from the political stomping ground that you occupy here in Washington. Just tell us who Charlie Kirk was to the American people. Yeah. Was he a household name? Because in the UK, he wouldn't necessarily have been known by everybody. But I get the impression here that he's much better known.
Yeah, he was really growing to that point, and a very powerful, influential conservative activist. Started off more than a decade ago with the American Tea Party, the conservative movement here that predated Trump, grew to major prominence with Trump to the point where he played a major role last year in Trump's presidential campaign as basically the de facto ground organization for his campaign, operating that through his group Turning Point USA.
And when we talk about him as being this sort of new breed of conservative commentator, what do you mean by that?
Well, he comes from the wing that we'd call nationalist populist. Folks like Steve Bannon, a little bit more like Tucker Carlson, not so much the Elon Musk, Peter Thiel side of things. Very much in line with, I've been covering Trump for a decade now. I would say that his world was Donald Trump Jr., J.D. Vance. They're very close with Vice President J.D. Vance, considered by many to be a potential heir to the MAGA here in America. So, hugely influential, and then also very influential in the online world, with the sports world, younger men, young conservatives in America, a lot of people who were first-time voters in this last election. So very, very much growing in prominence.
And very divisive.
Yes.
Incredibly divisive.
Yes.
And would fearlessly take on incredibly controversial issues. And I think in the UK, a lot of the youth in the UK who followed Charlie Kirk, and I still can't believe we're talking about him in the past tense here. Even if they didn't agree with some of his positions, they respected his ability to take a stand, disagree with somebody, shake their hand at the end of it and say, we can agree to disagree. That's the loss, isn't it, Tom?
Well, his style of politics is very combative. And this college tour that he was on, and he's been doing this for many years now, is this, this style of, one person versus whoever, right? And you can take that anywhere on YouTube. On the left, people like Pete Buttigieg have done this. On the right, Charlie Kirk is was very prominent for this, and that's what he was doing at Utah Valley University. It was, again, having debates out in the open, very, very combative, very forceful with it, but that is the style of politics right now.
And what do you think? I mean, we have to remember tonight that there's a grieving family, there's a devastated widow and 2 young children who've lost their father. And the time really for that reflection will go on, no doubt, for the next few weeks. But from a news point of view, from a political angle, what debates do you think this death will actually trigger now across America?
Well, I've been covering politics in America for about 25 years at this point. America is very divided right now. It is a political powder keg right now. You have a lot of folks in the middle, in the political middle, moderates who feel completely disenfranchised by both major parties. You have a lot of very angry Democrats. You have a lot of incredibly angry Republicans. And the discourse there has been a rise in political violence over the past decade to a point where, I was thinking about this as I was heading here today. It's stunning to me how almost normalized it is now. And it's I'm on a number of text chains with a number of sources, left, right, middle, folks I've known over the years. People are afraid. They're angry and afraid. So this is the dynamic that we're in right now.
And what can you trace that back to? Tom? Because I feel like that's a very recent phenomenon, the idea that opinions can be right or wrong, the Overton window of what you can and can't say.
Sure.
It seems to have shrunk. I would say in the last 5 years, I would take it, but in the UK, actually, Brexit was probably the first big issue that divided the country. But what do you put it down to here?
Social media. Algorithms which prioritize combat. Now, there's an upside and a downside to that, as in all things. And as a reporter, it's not my job to say whether something is right or wrong, only to observe these things. I've noticed, as somebody who, I was on Twitter for 16 years. I engage on left-leaning platforms. I engage on right. I try to. Frankly, it's like all of us these days. I try to be on as many as possible to understand what's happening in this world. But in the past 10 years, things have gotten very heated, perhaps too much so.
You see, it's interesting because as a Brit being here in America and watching your news channels, away from social media, just watching the channels that everybody has in their homes, I am struck by how polarizing those channels are. We really don't have the equivalent in the UK, and I never thought I'd say this, but it made me be grateful for Ofcom, which is our regulator in terms of balance, because it is so easy to get sucked into your own echo chamber in this country of politics.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I wrote about at 24/7 News immediately after this election, and something I've noticed, which I deal with I call them my civilian friends, people who are not in politics. They're not journalists. They don't live in this world with us. They used to not live this 24/7. People live in silos of algorithms now, to a point where it's easy to see things as incredibly violent, be told from either the left or the right that there's a civil war underway. We see this language, and when I try to tell my friends, I try to tell my family, try to break out of it. I used to say a decade ago is, if you're reading the New York Times, read the Wall Street Journal, right? If you got the BBC, go with the Guardian, all right? Try to get as many different news outlets as possible, but increasingly that's very hard to do when you're locked into TikTok, when you're locked into YouTube, when you're locked into Twitter, and it's the algorithm feeding these things.
Back to Charlie Kirk, the late Charlie Kirk, and I still can't believe I'm saying that. What do you think will be the reaction in Washington in the next few days and across America?
Well, immediately, my colleague at 24/7 News, Julie Grace Brufke, was on Capitol Hill today talking with folks just a little while ago. House Speaker Mike Johnson says terrible. He asked for a moment of silence for the family. Gabby Giffords, who is someone who experienced this herself, was almost killed by a gunman back in 2011. She's a Democrat. She said this as well, offering prayers. You've seen from a lot of elected leaders in particular saying, all right, guys, look, political violence is not the way. We have to calm down.
Okay, Tom Lobianco from 24/7 News, thank you so much for joining us. And myself and Ben Leo will, of course, work hard over the next few days to bring you as much of the reaction and the reflection and actually the admiration for the life of Charlie Kirk as we can. Charlie, back to you in the studio.
Bev Turner, live in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. Well, we are approaching midnight here in London. Well, Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a dad to 2 young children, but he was also a hero to the conservative movement. And tonight, Charlie Kirk, a titan of free speech, has been killed in what the governor of Utah described as a political assassination. He has been silenced in the most brutal way with a single shot from 200 yards as SWAT teams and police continue to scour Utah Valley University. A suspect is in custody and reaction is continuing to flood in from around the world. You're watching GB News, the People's Channel. We'll be back in just a moment.
This is your chance to win a motorhome and cash in our biggest giveaway to date. Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be the proud owner of this 2025 Benamar Primero. It comfortably accommodates 4 people and can be driven on your standard driving licence. Plus, you'll also bank an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. Make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 03325. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's midnight. I'm Charlie Peters, and tonight...
I want England to believe that again, because you guys brought Christianity to so much of the world. I want the Church of England to get its mojo back.
Devastating news coming out of the United States as Trump ally and conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has died after being shot at a university in Utah. President Trump announced Charlie Kirk's death on Truth Social, paying tribute by saying no one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all.
The chair would ask that all members present in the chamber and those in the gallery please rise for a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family.
American leaders have paused for a moment of silence in the House of Representatives as President Trump orders flags across the United States to be lowered to half-mast. The FBI, addressing the media earlier, confirmed that a person of interest is now in custody. And back here in my studio on the panel tonight, we've got the Director for Popular Conservatism, Mark Littlewood, and the GB News contributor, Stephen Allen. Well, US conservative influencer Charlie Kirk having been shot dead at an event at Utah Valley University. We're continuing to bring you rolling coverage of this breaking news. We've got footage from immediately after the shooting that we can show you now. Now, Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a dad to 2 young children, but also a hero to the conservative movement all around the world. And tonight, a titan of free speech has been killed in what the governor of Utah has described as a political assassination. Kirk has been silenced in the most brutal way. A single shot fired from 200 yards as SWAT teams and police officers continue to search Utah Valley University. Now, the FBI Director Kash Patel has reported that a suspect is in custody, but at a press conference in Utah in the last half hour or so, we do not know if that suspect is the person who matches their CCTV. Well, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C., the GB News presenter Ben Leo, who joins us. Ben, we're hearing more after that press conference about the state of this investigation and what the authorities know in Utah. The FBI, as you can imagine, leading that investigation, saying that their intelligence and also their serious or their SWAT teams are involved. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, it was quite a contradictory statement from the FBI there, saying that somebody has been apprehended, because we heard from the authorities in Utah in the last hour or so. They gave quite a poignant press conference, it has to be said, saying that somebody was in custody or is in custody, but they can't confirm yet their exact role in this terribly, desperately sad killing of Charlie Kirk. They wouldn't even confirm if a weapon had been seized either. Charlie, as you said, Charlie, was an absolute titan of free speech, of the conservative movement here in the United States and, of course, around the world as well. He was in London just a few months ago speaking to GB News on my show. He spoke at Oxford University. He spoke at Cambridge doing the exact same event as he was doing tonight, where he sits down in the open with thousands of university students arguing and sharing ideas, anything from immigration, trans ideology, Islam, rule of law and order. Tonight, though, Charlie, he was slain for his thoughts and his opinions, and I'll tell you why it's especially desperately sad, because having met Charlie, I can tell you he was a very, very sweet guy. He was a father of two very young children, a husband to a wife, Erica, who he leaves behind, and he did things in a way that, I mean, I'd argue, didn't have a vicious bone in his body. He argued with a wry smile. He made his opponents he was debating feel very comfortable. There wasn't an ounce of venom in him. And when you come to a point where we're having people murdered for their thoughts, for thought crimes, it's a desperately sad state of affairs. And just to prove how big a character Charlie was, it wasn't just confined to the conservative movement. He was long credited with getting President Donald Trump elected in November last year for these events, galvanizing the youth across America, getting them involved in politics and debate. And off the back of that, we've seen tributes tonight, Charlie and viewers, from people all across the political spectrum, not just conservatives, not just President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, but the likes of Barack Obama, the likes of Joe Biden, all paying tribute to Charlie and his character and sending their prayers to his family. Even Sir Keir Starmer, our own Prime Minister, tonight taking to X to pay tribute to him. Sir Keir Starmer said, "My thoughts this evening are with the loved ones of Charlie Kirk. It's heartbreaking that a young family has been robbed of a father and a husband. We must all be free to debate openly and freely without fear. There can be no justification for political violence." And if you're listening to GB News' own Bev Turner, who's with me here in Washington, D.C., she had some thoughts on Keir Starmer's comments there, particularly about the idea that we must be free to debate openly and freely without fear. I guess that's a conversation for tomorrow, because tonight, in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, our thoughts and prayers are with his family and with his children. And it wrangles the heart, Charlie, to know that his two babies, his two young children, will now be growing up without a father. And it lays bare the question now about democracy and the idea of free speech, not just in the United States, but back home in the UK as well. Because when you have an atmosphere of, let's take Epping for an example, where people so flagrantly use the term Nazi or Hitler towards their political opponents, people in some cases who are just concerned about the direction of travel of their country, concerned about the safety of their children. When you use that kind of language so loosely, is it a surprise? I don't know, is it a surprise when some people, maybe who are very, very disturbed, use that as justification for violence and murder?
And Ben, that free speech debate will go on, and we've already had it spark tonight. I mean, they've killed Charlie Kirk, but I think the atmosphere of supporting free speech and promoting it, that will not go away with his death. But in terms of information we're getting on the ground in the United States, Ben, we're hearing that the FBI has put up a hotline for more people to submit information. You spoke about that contradictory status, it seemed, from the press conference, and that they have a suspect in custody, but they're still continuing to search, and they're not sure if the person in the CCTV matches the person that they have in custody. We also heard in that press conference other questions about the fact that Charlie Kirk, in his final moments, and he was giving his final address to people, was speaking about mass shootings, and that is the moment that he was shot. What a key detail that was from that question from the press. And they asked, is the person who asked that question in custody. We didn't get an answer to that. But, Ben, that seems like crucial information.
I mean, is it ironic? Is it coincidence? Probably not. The fact that Charlie, at the precise moment he lost his life, was talking specifically about mass shootings and trans shooters, people of a transgender background who, it's argued over this side of the pond, have been responsible for an increasing number of mass shootings. And I have to say, there are tweets now being unearthed, and I'll just give a caveat to this before I announce this to you. These are unconfirmed reports, these are unconfirmed tweets, but I'll say them anyway to give you some potential colour. There are tweets now being unearthed here in the United States, or ex-posts as I should say, from somebody 24 hours ago saying Charlie Kirk will be at my college university tomorrow. Something big will happen. I hope he is evaporated. Now, it could just be somebody 24 hours ago on a wind-up. It could just be some silly young kid just typing nonsense on the internet. But I can tell you now that particular tweet is being looked at now by the authorities.
And Ben, of course, as is often the case, we do see these sorts of, often they're jokes in threats of violence and people seeking to cause fear and consternation and anxiety among sort of right-wing or conservative speakers when they visit campuses. You say, obviously, that this is, unverified at this stage about what that information could be as it pertains to this evening, but it's the sort of information that the authorities will be very interested in indeed. I should also clarify, I was speaking before about having them a suspect in custody. It's actually a person of interest, which just goes to show how little we know at this stage of how this investigation is going. We're showing you footage on your screens now of the moment after that single shot was fired, we believe, from 200 yards away, and everyone immediately sprinting away. And Ben Leo, in Washington, D.C., we've also heard tonight that just 6 officers were at this campus event with 3,000 people, and there wasn't any specific security for Charlie Kirk. Ben Leo, as you are in the United States right now, do you think this is going to lead to a change with more security for political events, more security at campus debates? What sort of effect could that have on free speech in the United States?
I mean, Charlie, it was only last night here in Washington, D.C. that President Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, or the Secretary for War now, as it's been rebranded, they took to the streets of this great city and went for dinner. It was a show for the media. They brought the White House press pool along. Donald Trump wanted to show the world that he'd cleaned up D.C., the capital here in the United States, and it was safe to go outside. Less than 24 hours later, Charlie Kirk is slaughtered. And let me tell you something about Charlie Kirk's own personal security. When he came to the UK a few months ago to speak to me and GB News, he had about 3 or 4 personal private security guards with him. When he does these kind of events, these Turning Point USA events, he'll sit down at university campuses. He still has his own personal security, but as you mentioned, no more than, I'd say, 4 or 5 people who I would assume are there to stop anybody trying to lunge at Charlie and get to him physically. The shot which killed him tonight, Charlie, the single shot which penetrated his neck, and I've seen some of the horrific videos doing the rounds online, the up-close and personal videos. They are now imprinted on my brain. To be honest, I wish I hadn't seen them. The shot was fired from around 200 yards away. Firearms experts are saying that the very particular sound of the crack of the round when it hit Charlie sounded like it came from potentially some sort of rifle as opposed to a pistol. So even if Charlie Kirk did have dozens and dozens of personal security around him, could they have stopped an assassination like this from 200 yards away? Probably not. And you get the feeling now, Charlie and viewers, that despite Charlie Kirk's probably best intentions going forward, if you ask any of his friends would they want these kind of events to continue, he'd say yes. You'd have to think now that there will be some sort of dilution going forward.
Well, Ben Leo live in Washington, D.C. Thank you. I'm sure we'll join you later on in the programme. Well, back here in Britain, we've had a significant reaction to the killing of Charlie Kirk. The Foreign Secretary, only recently in her post, Yvette Cooper, has released a statement saying that she is deeply shocked by the killing of Charlie Kirk in Utah. Political violence has no place in our societies, and our thoughts and condolences are with his family. We've also heard from the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. She has told GB News that there are no words good enough to express the horror of this. The killing of Charlie Kirk is a blow to everything Western civilization stands for. open discourse, robust debate and peaceful dissent. He lived his life by those very principles, no matter the danger it put him in. This may have happened far from our shores, but the rising intolerance of opposing views affects us all. We cannot turn a blind eye to it. My thoughts are with Charlie's family, his wife Erica and their children. We've also heard in a lengthy statement from Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, who has said that the murder of Charlie Kirk is a tragedy and a sign of the utter desperation and cowardice of those who could not defeat him in argument. Charlie Kirk has been killed not for espousing extremist views, because he didn't. He has been killed for saying things that used to be simple common sense. He has been killed because he had the courage to stand up publicly for reasonable opinions held by millions and millions of ordinary people, both in the United States and Britain. The world has a shining new martyr to free speech. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and loved ones. And finally, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, he's also paid tribute with the following, saying, "My thoughts this evening are with the loved ones of Charlie Kirk. It is heartbreaking that a young family has been robbed of a father and a husband. We must all be free to debate openly and freely without fear. There can be no justification for political violence." Well, here in London, I want to join my panellists, Stephen Allen, GB News contributor, and also Mark Littlewood, director of the Popular Conservatives. Stephen Allen, you weren't here earlier when we first read out that statement from Boris Johnson, but Mark Littlewood said it was the best he'd heard so far, encapsulating sort of the seriousness of the incident and what has happened tonight in Utah, but also placing Charlie Kirk right at the centre of being a titan of free speech.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as though I normally agree with Boris Johnson on many things, but every word of that landed perfectly, didn't it? Because it is about free speech. I know earlier we were talking about, was that going to be linked to, is that the motivation? Of course it has to be, because look at the thing that's going to be silenced by this. And this is what I don't understand. I don't know why people don't get it. When I was growing up, everyone said free speech was a good thing. That was a lesson we just kind of got in the 80s and 90s. And I think it's because we heard the stories of what, you know, the oppressive life you could live in Russia and stuff. And yet somehow, and I didn't even notice when it changed, free speech is now, it's flipped. It's seen as a bad thing. It's seen as a terrifying thing. Prince Harry, a couple of years ago in a podcast, saying America should look at its First Amendment. That came out of nowhere. That's a bit of a cheeky thing to do, is to move to a country and tell them they shouldn't mess with their amendments, because there's a whole generation that see the idea of free speech being used as an excuse to say bad things. But you know what? Even if it is, that's not the point here, is it? I've watched loads of debates of Charlie's, and I love them because I disagree with them. We didn't see eye to eye on so many things. His Oxford debate, it's not like he won all of those. His Jubilee round Group 1, fascinating to watch. And if you only want to watch people you agree with, you've wasted your life.
Absolutely.
That is the whole purpose. And yet I don't see why people, at least now we know someone, wants to not win the debate, but silence someone. You don't win the argument if you simply stop your opponent talking.
And let's go to Mark Littlewood now, because, you know, I think it's so important what Stephen Allen's just said there about the idea that free speech requires people to really vociferously engage with those they don't agree with. And nobody did that more often, I think, in the popular media than Charlie Kirk. You had those sort of debate me sessions where he'd sit down and one after another just engage with people. A lot of people really hated him for it. Yeah. And sometimes I thought he was really annoying when he was doing it. Sometimes I watched it, I thought, God, you really are quite smarmy. But he was very good at it.
Yeah, and this is the thing to my mind. Look, he was on the Conservative right, so you may disagree with his views, but the reason you're correctly on GB News and others are describing as a titan of free speech is that his methodology in promoting that was come and prove me wrong. Sit down and argue with me. I don't care what side you're on, try and prove me wrong. That was his modus operandi. It wasn't just coming up with good flashy slogans or making a great propaganda video for whatever particular thing that he happened to support. It was about engagement. And that's the key free speech thing. And to Stephen's point about how did we lose this, we sort of morphed away from free speech into a free speech but kind of culture, right? You won't find any remotely mainstream British politician or American politician who says, you know what, I'm against free speech. What you'll find too many of them saying is, I'm against free speech, but then look at the footnotes. Other than in a very wide range of circumstances which actually end up curtailing it. And we've got to get away from that. And we've got to get away culturally. It's not just about the laws. We've got to get away from this thing that a response to an argument is to say, how dare you say that? I'm offended. That is not a response to an argument. That is not engaging in discourse. That is not engaging in debate. That is an attempt to close down debate. A perfectly legal one. You're not using any force. You're not calling the police on people. But culturally, I think far too many people have got into the, if it offends someone, don't say it.
Could you say quickly on that, though? I think also that might be what we were dealing with 5 years ago, the idea of I'm offended, you shouldn't say it. And now it's I don't feel safe.
Yeah, yeah.
That is, it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
It's a great way to control the other person. Again, you just shut someone down. I'm not safe, so you need to be silent.
Are you both increasingly nervous about the state of free speech in Britain in light of having digested what's happened tonight? Because I was saying it before, right, with you, Mark, the idea that this could be a sort of Charlie Hebdo moment, but good insofar as people actually learn the right lessons now because there are more people online who are willing to talk. But there is an increasing sense, as you're just pointing to now, this sort of free speech with the footnotes, as I believe in free speech, but... And it's increasingly around hate speech. You've got this Islamophobia definition coming in. I think a lot of people are going to be nervous that if they talk about those issues, they too might have a target on their backs, you know, literally and figuratively.
Yes. I mean, I think the whole hate speech thing is another very cunning way of curtailing free speech. I mean, you know, it's labelled you mustn't do hate speech, but by and large, it's simply applied to bad manners or offensive speech or off-colour jokes, not whipping up some genocidal holocaust, just saying something that essentially causes offence. This is the problem. And we've taken this sort of halfway house. Part of it, I think, is a reaction to the explosion of social media, such that everybody now has a voice, which I basically think is a good thing. But it leaves a greater footprint, doesn't it? If you were going back 20 or 30 years ago, people would be debating things down the pub, and the only impression it would make would be in the memories of the people you were speaking to.
Yep.
Now everything's said by everybody with an X account or a Blue Sky account or an Instagram account. It's there forever, and lots of people can take offence at a lot of things.
Gents, back to you in a moment, but joining us now down the line is the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Greg, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and please, if you could just start, what was your relationship with Charlie Kirk? Because we've heard from so many people giving their tributes who never met him, never worked with him. But as a Republican, you must have looked at him as such an inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, he's been around for well over 10 years, and he started Turning Point USA when he was, you know, just out of high school, basically. And, you know, he's 18 years old. So now he's been a powerful influence and a really powerful influence on young people. He's very persuasive. And what he did was really two things. One is convince young people that there is a common sense revolution, you know, that he was right and they were wrong if they were debating with him. And so he flipped, you know, he really converted a lot of young people to be conservatives. But he also made it possible for young people who were conservative to basically out themselves, you know, that they didn't have to hide. They didn't have to, you know, make sure that their professor at their university thought they were a liberal or a progressive, and because they wanted to get a better grade. You know, he made it acceptable for young conservatives to come out. And so, you know, I think he was really good at being persuasive and also just a really good guy, a really likable guy.
Look, the reaction in Britain has been mixed, to say the least. We've seen all these politicians give these very moving statements, of course, which is, I'm sure, will be welcomed by Charlie Kirk's family and those close to him. But there's also been, I have to be frank, you know, quite a disappointing and negative political reaction as well. A lot of people moving this away from Charlie Kirk and the issue of free speech and talking about gun control, almost sort of capitalising on his killing. We've heard here from Kevin Maguire, who's a Daily Mirror journalist, of course. He says the US far-right Trump champion Charlie Kirk, shot dead tonight, opposed gun control. America needs to disarm Americans. When you hear statements like that being made by Brits about the incident tonight, what's your reaction?
Oh, it's completely obscene because they don't do their homework on gun control. They don't understand that, you know, that most people that own guns, 99.9%, are, you know, perfectly legal gun owners, but also aren't criminals. And so, you know, this is not a gun issue. violent crime is a crime issue. We have the George Soros-backed DAs that don't prosecute crime. The murderer of the man who killed Irina, I can't pronounce her last name, Zarutska, I think, Ukrainian refugee in Charlotte, North Carolina, not a city known for rampant violence, but he had 14 prior felony convictions or felony arrests. He was out on no cash bail. The Soros-backed DA just released him, and he killed this poor woman on a subway, on a train with a knife. It had nothing to do with, but it doesn't fit the left's narrative because, first of all, the victim was not a person of color, and so that doesn't really fit their narrative. And then the person was killed not by a gun, but by a lunatic with a knife. So it hardly reported on mainstream media in the U.S. Fortunately, the conservative media was able to cover it. So look, it's a typical reaction about gun control. And what they don't admit is that the numbers are completely correlated with mental health issues, with the number of people that used to be institutionalized that are now out on the streets, the amount of medication that's prescribed for mental health issues. So, we have a crime problem, that's for sure. And that's basically due to, in the last 5 or 6 years, the defund the police movement, the Soros-backed DAs. But, if you look at the numbers...
Greg, just quickly, I was trying to bring us back to what was heard tonight, because I totally see what you're pointing out here, but what we heard in this press conference earlier was the governor of Utah being absolutely unequivocal about what happened tonight in Utah. He said this is a political assassination. Obviously, I'm sitting in for Patrick Christys tonight, but he's actually sent me a post from Charlie Kirk from April this year. Very prescient post now, very sad post to read. It says, assassination culture is spreading on the left. He's talking about how in California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione, obviously a controversial figure associated with a killing in Manhattan. I say controversial figure, that's playing it down, isn't it, somewhat? But and Charlie Kirk wrote in April, the left is being whipped into a violent frenzy. Reading Charlie's words here, and I think there's going to be a lot of reflection on what Charlie said over his short but very powerful life, I'm seeing him almost recognising the threat that he was facing in, very sadly, the all too close future.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, he had to know that he was at risk almost all of the time, and this was a political assassination. And yeah, the rhetoric on the left is outrageous. I mean, Governor Newsom was on a podcast this week, threatening the right, saying that, we have to fight fire with fire. We're not going to take it anymore. I mean, it's a little bit outrageous. They hated Charlie Kirk because he was persuasive and because he was right. And he also, as I said earlier, he was a really good guy. He was a very good influence on young people. I've been consoling my daughter, who's 24 tonight, who is a big fan, and such a huge number of that generation, the people in their 20s now, that have really grown up with Charlie Kirk and really, were influenced by him. So, it's a sad day. It's so sad for his family. Young wife, 2 young children. The photos going around are just painful to watch.
They're horrific. They're horrific. But Greg Swenson will take comfort from your tribute this evening, and thank you very much for joining us, the chairman of Republican Overseas, Greg Swenson, live in Dubai. Well, back here in the studio, I'm joined now by Associate Professor at the University of Cambridge, James Orr. James, thank you very much for coming in so late at night on this truly tragic day, not just for Conservatives in America, but really across the world, and all people who believe in freedom of speech and peaceful political engagement. What was your reaction when you heard this appalling news?
I could hardly believe it. I was with friends earlier. The news came through that Charlie had been shot. I immediately could understand the context of the shooting. Only last week I was working with his team to fly out with him to the University of Missouri on the 29th of September, and he'd asked me very generously to be part of that event. And he was explaining the security involved, the state police, private security. I was with him and his wife Erica for supper in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and gosh, he was a force of nature. I mean, I feel like I knew him well. We only got to know each other just 2 or 3 months ago, but it's, I think, a testament to his character that I felt we'd become firm friends. He texted me just 3 days ago asking me some obscure question in moral philosophy so he could be better prepared for these engagements, this sort of peaceful discourse that he tried to encourage on campuses all across America. And I witnessed him at this fundraiser in Colorado, and I thought, my gosh, the energy you've got in terms of his sort of understanding the way the elections work, how to build up a successful youth movement. I mean, what he built up in 13 years. He left school at 18. He built up in 13 years probably the most successful youth political movement we've seen, certainly in America has seen, and that the West has seen in many, many decades. And I think, you know, if the political opponents of the Republicans had to take a single person out, had to target one person, it would have been Charlie Kirk. He will be a devastating loss, obviously, to his family, to the American right, to America. I mean, he was your archetypal American man, American boy. Just 31. He was humble. I mean, I spent weeks trying to get him to call me James, but he refused. It was always Dr. Orr. He always had that sort of extraordinary humility. It was just absurd, given his success and given what he had built up, what he had achieved. And my heart goes out to his wonderful wife, Erica, just such a sweet person, two little kids, extended family. And he built up in Turning Point USA an enormous family, extraordinary loyalty, 1,000 people on his payroll, extraordinary energy, and was just a phenomenon, a force of nature, and a real threat to the political left. We don't know, of course, what the details are, what the motivations of the shooter are, but it does seem to have been a targeted political assassination.
Political assassination is the language used by the governor of Utah tonight. And Dr. Orr, you think about the conscience of a conservative, Barry Goldwater, paving the way for Reagan soon on that pamphlet, that vision, a young conservative giving that idea, and it was lapped up by young conservatives right across America. What Charlie Kirk did with Turning Point USA was sort of bring that to a digital platform to gather I want to say whipping up, because he just set ablaze so many minds on these issues in such a stark and direct manner. His influence will be felt for a very long time indeed, and it's being felt right now with one of his close allies, of course, the president, breaking the news not only of his death, but also eulogising him, praising him for the role that he had in building that movement. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was... we had supper in Cambridge, I think, just a couple of months ago. He was very, very busy at the time. He was heading off to Oxford and doing the unions. And I think a call came through from you guys, actually. Is there any way we could persuade Charlie to come down? And I said, look, it would be great if you could. And they worked it out. He said, yeah, I know this is important. And he made time for it. Did a fantastic interview, I seem to remember, with Ben. He cared about Britain a great deal. He was always asking about the politics and the different dynamics and how he could help and how he could fire people up. But it's always very respectful, very focused on argument, on facts and on reason. And he built up this extraordinary. It's very rare that you get people as talented as that in the sort of in the debating chamber who are also extraordinarily successful entrepreneurs and who understand how politics works. And he combined just staggeringly disparate talents, and his loss is going to be very deeply felt. And James, you're talking about the 2 or 3 months in which you were working closely with him. It reflects on a period in which British and American Conservatives are now becoming more closely aligned and recognising these core issues that need to be dealt with regardless of which party you represent. And when Justice Scalia came to Britain, he was a chief, Supreme Court Chief Justice there, he spoke about how it felt like coming home, even though he was an Italian-American, not born or raised here, but because he recognised the nursery rhymes, he knew that American culture was British culture. I wonder, in the short time you spent with Charlie in Britain, did you get a sense that he was having the same feeling being here as well, experiencing the ancient philosophy and political tradition that inspired his own?
In that famous clip of Scalia, he talks about the common law and the great Supreme Court justice who'd learned so much from people like Blackstone and Cook, and Charlie was fascinated by that. He felt that his heritage, as so many Americans do, felt their heritage traced all the way back to these islands, even if ethnically you're not sort of part of it. I think Charlie was. Kirk, he was very proud of his Scottish roots. I once made the mistake of asking him, you know, where his family had hailed from originally. So, well, what do you think with a name like
Kirk will do it.
And he was so proud of that, and proud of the Anglosphere, of the English-speaking peoples, and it's just heartbreaking. The last time I saw him was just before I was catching the plane back from Phoenix. This must have been 2.5 weeks ago, and he insisted on taking me out to lunch, and then he took me back to his flat, and it was just me, him, and a whiteboard, and somebody taking notes on a laptop in the corner, and he was just grilling me for 2 hours. He wanted a free philosophy sermon. I was delighted to give it, but again, it was just because he wanted to prepare and get himself ready for modelling civil disagreement, and that's been so cruelly shattered tonight.
Tonight was the first of 14 stops he had set on campus tours as part of his speaking engagements. And in what will now be some of the final pictures of Charlie Kirk before his cruel killing, you see him smiling, laughing, engaging with so many people, thousands, delighted to see him, throwing hats into the crowd. And where he was shot, seated by himself, ready to address everyone and anyone who wanted to come and speak and engage with him. That is the way he lived his life, and that's how he engaged as a political activist. That is a cruel and evil thing to snuff out in this way.
It is indeed. It's going to be one of the iconic moments in the history of American politics, and you know, I'm filled with foreboding about the future, and I just hope that the American people can heal, that the American right can learn to forgive and move on, but without forgetting the extraordinary cruelty that was inflicted tonight.
Dr. James Orr, thank you very much for coming into the studio this evening. Now, joining us now is the policy chairman of the New York Young Republican Club, David Holtzman. Mr. Holtzman, thank you very much for joining us this evening. First and foremost, your reaction to this shocking and appalling news from Utah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. And the assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah today is an absolutely horrible event and a watershed event in American politics, especially for so many young conservatives. I represent the New York Young Republican Club, and we have more than 1,800 young conservative members in New York, in the heart of Democrat America. And all of us are just absolutely shattered at what happened to Charlie and what his wife and his 2 kids are going through, who horribly and tragically had to be there on the scene earlier today.
David, this is a moment not just devastating for the American conservative movement, but it should be a devastating movement for political movements of all stripes and all backgrounds. How do you think Charlie Kirk will be remembered by conservatives in the United States, but also around the world?
Charlie's legacy is going to be one of civility and order in politics. Charlie was not a provocateur. He was not a radical. He represented common sense conservatism. And on so many college campuses across the United States, he inspired me and so many of my fellow young Republicans. And because he wasn't a fighter, he stood up for what he believed in, but he wasn't going to put it in your face. He was going to talk to the left, and he had rational conversations with them, to engage with them, to win people over with ideas, not with violence. Republicans disavow violence. It's not something that we believe in. And Charlie's legacy in the years going forward will be someone who stood for that at a moment when Americans had to choose for what comes next between what tempts so many on the unfortunate, on the hard right, and so many on the traditional right who believe in common sense conservatism, Charlie's legacy is going to be Charlie's legacy is going to be one of civility and order.
It's tributes are being paid from all around the world to Charlie Kirk, but there's also going to be some hard discussions now, aren't there, about the state of freedom of speech, not only in the United States, but for political activists and commentators around the world, because these are threats and fears that are felt, I know, certainly here in Britain. Colleagues of mine are reacting to this tonight in Washington, D.C., thinking this is a nervous time to be a journalist. This is a difficult time to be engaged in political debate because the atmosphere is febrile and the threats are plentiful. We look to the United States often as a place of, obviously the First Amendment and the excellent foundational rights of free speech that you have in the United States, but also we recognise the fact that there are plenty of people, very violent people, who don't want people to speak out. What do you think is going to happen to the free speech debate in the US? And could Charlie Kirk's horrendous killing revitalise a free speech movement and bring it forward now?
The core of any society is law and order. If laws are not enforced, there's chaos, and that is the beginning of collapse. Charlie took the bullet that President Trump was supposed to take last July 13 in Butler, Pennsylvania, and that missed President Trump's carotid by half an inch. And Charlie, unfortunately, took the same shot. We have a real problem with political violence in the United States. It's a real problem. And from Steve Scalise, who was shot by a radical Bernie Sanders supporter about 7-8 years ago, to President Trump, to Charlie Kirk, we don't know what the future looks like. And if conservatives are afraid to express their opinions, and if patriotic Americans are afraid to stand up for their country, then the good side loses, and order loses, and chaos reigns, and we don't know what will happen next. Conservatism and free speech are the bulwark of civilization, and if we are afraid to stand up for what we believe in, then the bad people will take reign, and they will seize the day.
OK, Policy Chairman at the New York Young Republican Club, David Holtzman, thank you very much for joining us on GB News tonight. Well, let's get further reaction from the United States, because joining us now is the Breitbart News Editor-in-Chief and host of the Alex Marlow Show podcast, Alex Marlow himself. Alex, thank you very much for joining GB News tonight as we continue to react to this shocking and appalling news out of the United States of the killing of Charlie Kirk. What do you think this appalling event means for freedom of speech in the United States?
Well, it's a war on freedom of speech. Charlie was a tireless warrior, not just for conservative values, but for Judeo-Christian values, tying them to America's founding. His arguments were rooted in optimism for our country and believing that he had the backing of our Constitution, the First Amendment, the right to speak, the right to debate, the right to take your message to places that might be ideologically hostile without fear of physical reprisals. That's what he stood for, and that's how he died. And that's as tragic as it gets for this country. My heart breaks for the whole country. But I'll tell you, I knew Charlie as a man. He was a friend of mine since he was a teenager. I was a weekly guest on his wildly successful podcast. He was a father, and he was an optimist for America and Western civilization in general. And when he was on breaks, you would see him reading his Bible and studying the Bible, and he was that guy. He was that type of guy. He had no skeletons in his closet, and he wanted to live. He wanted longevity. He wanted a legacy. He lived a healthy life. He lived a godly life. And to be cut down in this way, it has to represent a turning point for America, where we now need to reaffirm our free speech values and be steadfast here in the face of unbelievable adversity.
Marlow, he was that guy. I mean, what a way to put it, because we've seen so many tributes coming in. And you say, you know, man with no skeleton in his closets. He was a dedicated family man. He came across exactly as he was, sincere, honest, and sweet as well. Very sweet man. He clearly engaged people in good faith because he wanted to have open, honest, direct discussions with people. He wasn't there to embarrass anyone unless they wanted to be embarrassed themselves. And some people did their best, didn't they, when they went up against him in their debates, but he did it all sincerely. There was an honesty and an integrity to Charlie Kirk that's been taken away cruelly and viciously in what's been described tonight, Alex Marlow, as a political assassination. What do those words mean to you from the governor of Utah, and what does that mean about the state of politics in the United States?
Yeah, it is a political assassination. It's the highest profile political assassination that's been successful in this country in half a century. And that is unbelievable to say that. I got to know Charlie when he started writing for me at Breitbart News when he was just a teenager. And I met him, I think, in person for the first time in 2015 at a Tea Party event, a pretty small event. People might remember that news cycle from a decade ago. And he just was this unassuming, optimistic guy who's interested in this country, interested in why America was an exceptional place. And to think that a decade later he would be gunned down in his prime because he was debating in hostile territory, which is what American universities have become, while he was sitting there trying to reach young people on their own terms, on their own turf. He flies to them. He's got enough money, he's got enough power, he doesn't need to do this, and yet he does it to try to get the word out about God and country. And that's where they choose to take him out. It is so symbolic, and this must resonate with people in your audience and my audience. And we need to use this as a moment to fortify and get stronger.
And get stronger. But there'll be many people watching and listening to this appalling news tonight and thinking that a possibility is that many people who want to get involved in political discussion will now wilt away because they've seen what happens if you are even as honest, sweet, and I will use that word again because that's how he came across to me at least, and as full of integrity as Charlie Kirk. If even he is being gunned down, then what is it for someone else to come forward and take that risk? Do you not think, Alex, that there is now a possibility that many good, interesting, brave and unique voices, like Charlie's, could be extinguished by this event tonight?
Absolutely, that's my fear. And that's why I've been trying to share in the places I've had the microphone today to try to share that we need to steel ourselves for what's to come. And we need to be those happy warriors who are out there fighting with a smile. He was a sweet man. He was an authentic man. And I think that's what it caused people, even when they may have disagreed with him on something, to give him the benefit of the doubt because he lacked cynicism. He was a sincere believer in the West and in America in particular, and in the Bible, the Judeo-Christian Bible. And he brought that message and enthusiasm wherever he went. He was also a tireless worker. Now, I've got a bit of a workaholic streak myself. I've only seen two people who have dazzled me with their work ethic, and the other one's the president of the United States right now. The other one's Charlie Kirk. That's who he was. That's how he lived every day of his life. And it is one of these moments where if we wilt now, then the left will have won, that whoever this assassin is will have won. The people who inspired him, all of the fools who are in American media today on the left who are rushing to the first microphone, rushing to the first camera to be able to announce that Charlie brought this on himself, which you've already seen on MSNBC. We've virtually seen that from Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, who are out there suggesting basically Charlie deserved it because of things he said in the past. Charlie was not a divisive figure. Charlie was a sincere debater who wanted clarity in what's happening in American politics and in American life.
Alex Marlow, the Breitbart News editor-in-chief and host of the Alex Marlow Show. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And thank you also on what must be a very emotionally difficult day. Thank you for sharing your reflections on this appalling news with the killing of Charlie Kirk. Well, let's go back to my panel. I've got Stephen Allen to my left, Mark Littlewood to my right. Not a reflection of your political stances, of course, but gents, what you've just heard there from Alex Marlow, he's worried that people could wilt away, right? And this is the fear that we've been saying now for the last 4 hours. And it's very legitimate, isn't it? Because there will be people watching this news and thinking, I did quite fancy going to one of those events and challenging someone like Charlie Kirk. They might think twice now.
Well, quite, and potentially worse than that, Charlie, in that not just people perhaps not going to the events, people saying, I don't want to be, the next Charlie Kirk. People who might be expressing controversial opinions, heartfelt opinions, and thinking, actually, I'm going to retreat a little. This is going to be an incredible test, I think, of the mettle of the American conservative movement and the American people more generally. Expressing heartfelt, sincere but controversial views can never be made completely safe. But you feel that it's less safe than it's been for a while. And it's going to be an enormous test of courage for American conservatives and the American people. I suspect they're up to that test.
But are we? That's the question I want to put. Are we in Britain? Because to be frank, I'm usually a reporter. I'm not allowed to say my opinion, but I'm in the hot seat and it's 1:45 a.m. So I'll say this: we need a free speech revolution in Britain. There's no doubt about that in my mind. And while we're fearing that people might wilt away in the United States, I'm really hopeful that all the politicians putting out statements tonight saying what a tragedy this is, there could be no justification for violence, free speech, that we hold them to account when they use state violence on free speech, when they lock people up for sharing the crimes of thought and writing and conscience.
That's the difference between the two nations, isn't it? What we're talking about tonight is very American, but what's happening over here is the fear of the police, the fear of the knock on the door, the fear of 6 police turning up to say that your books are a bit Brexit.
We've also got the fear of Islamist extremism, and that's definitely not the state, not overtly pushing that. That is a thing that happens to us as well. We do have that fear of violence as well.
That's interesting if you think about what you've just said there about the idea that this action will make people change their minds about how they behave. If, I'm not sure we could ever know if that was the intended consequence, but if so, it moves closer towards the definition of terrorism, doesn't it? Where it's not the outcome of the act, but it's that secondary effect. If that's what you're after, you're getting near terrorism. And the problem is the right can't fix it. So I'm spending time looking at the left-wing part of social media, and until that area changes its mind, then we do have to worry about free speech. The right can sit around saying, this is terrible. Of course it will. But whenever the right, they're posting things on social media, finding quotes from Charlie where he talks about empathy, so they're proudly saying they have no empathy about it because he said it was a modern phrase created in some new era. How are you missing what's happened? How can you be that non-human and yet do it with pride? So much though I'm not going to keep this thought to myself. I'll put it on social media. Until that changes, until people who disagree with the things he said step up and go, no, if I want to win this debate, I'll learn how to argue. I'll get me Graham's hierarchy of disagreement. I'll learn logical fallacies and I'll turn up and I'll beat someone in debate. Rather than try and shoot them to silence them.
Last word to you, Mark, very quickly from back to DC.
Governor Cox of Utah put it very, very well in his press conference earlier. He said, if you are celebrating this in any small way at all, go and have a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror. Governor Cox was bang on right.
He was. Thank you very much, both of you. Let's cross back now live to Washington, D.C. to join GB News presenter Ben Leo, who's been keeping us up to date with all the latest lines and plenty of reaction to this tragedy in Utah today. Ben Leo, we've been discussing all night about the impact this could have on free speech in the United States and the United Kingdom. But first and foremost, we need to think about the impact it's going to have on a young, very small, now very fragile family.
Yeah, Charlie, I've been saying all night, viewers, good evening. I've been saying all night, it breaks my heart to know that beyond the identity that Charlie Kirk had as a Trump ally, as a leading political titan here of the Conservative movement, forget all that. He was a human being. He was a father of 2 young children, and it affected me very personally this evening because his children are my age, and it's something Charlie and I discussed off-air in London a few months ago when he was courteous enough to come and speak to us on GB News. I pray for his children tonight. I'm desperately sad knowing those babies will be growing up without their father, and beyond that being a great father, a very proud and loving father. As I said, he was a political powerhouse, and you've mentioned already tonight, Charlie, he did things with a smile. He never wanted to make his opponents look stupid. He wanted to have open, fair debate, which is the underpin of democracy. And you just fear now, when somebody's been slain for their thoughts, which, by the way, aren't extreme. I've heard comments tonight saying Charlie Kirk was an extremist for this or that. The kind of stuff Charlie Kirk talked about, strong borders, not wanting to mutilate children with trans ideology, law and order, tackling crime, these were normal, common sense thoughts even just 10 years ago. Something went wrong, didn't it, over the past decade or so? The feeling was we were getting back on track, not least with the intention of the Trump administration here. But God bless Charlie Kirk and his children tonight. There has been an update from FBI Director Kash Patel in the last 10 minutes or so. I can confirm that the shooter has been apprehended. He's in police custody. Kash Patel posted on X about 10 minutes ago, the subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. Thank you to the local state authorities in Utah for your partnership with the FBI. We'll provide updates when we're able. And there are some videos doing the rounds online now about the suspected shooter who potentially, if it's the person, lying down on a rooftop near a campus building in Utah Valley University where Charlie was murdered tonight. A person appears to be lying down on the roof with what appears to be a rifle in his hands, and it has, chilling echoes of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, when one of your previous guests, Charlie, so eloquently put, Donald Trump escaped with his life on that occasion, and it seems now that, unfortunately, Charlie Kirk, for his efforts, was the one to take the bullet. Just before I let you go, I've reposted on my X feed tonight one of Charlie's most popular posts from recent years. He went on Fox News here in America some weeks ago. It was actually on the 27th of July, and he brought his, it's a beautiful clip, it brings me to tears watching it now. He brought his young daughter onto the set of the Fox Breakfast Show, live on air, gave her a cuddle, and you can see the love he has for his children. He was beaming from ear to ear, was Charlie. And he captions that video, "Get married, have kids, and stop partying into oblivion. Leave a legacy. Be courageous. Happy Sunday, and God bless to all the parents out there." Well, if you ask me tonight, Charlie and viewers, Charlie Kirk did just that. He left a legacy, and boy, what a legacy it was.
Thank you, Ben Leo, live in Washington, D.C. for that moving tribute. across several hours of coverage from you live in the capital. Well, we're going to close our coverage this evening on a special edition, an extended edition of Patrick Christys tonight, with live shots of Washington, D.C. at the White House, where the flag of the United States is flying at half-mast. It's done so because President Trump has ordered it to be so, in tribute towards Charlie Kirk, who was a proud and loving father and a political powerhouse. Killed tonight at the age of just 31, he leaves behind a wife and 2 children. He was a father, he was a husband, but he was also an inspiration to millions. He was a titan of free speech, and he has been killed in what the governor of Utah has described as a political assassination. He has been silenced in the most brutal way. A single shot fired from 200 yards. The SWAT teams and police officers now continue to scour Utah Valley University, the scene of his killing, the last place where Charlie Kirk will be seen to share his message of open engagement. Now, the FBI Director Kash Patel has reported that a person of interest is in custody, but the investigations continue. What Charlie Kirk did throughout his life was foundational to the formation of the United States of America. When someone takes Charlie Kirk's life, they are also taking away the ideals of that nation. Charlie Kirk will be remembered as a man who inspired so many, and his life will live on in the memory of those who loved him. He was a champion for free speech. You've been watching Charlie Peters covering for Patrick Christys here on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Now, as we go through the rest of today, overnight and into tomorrow, the heaviest, most persistent rain will clear away, but there will be plenty of showers following in behind. All the unsettled weather is due to an area of low pressure to the northwest of the country, and it's this that's been driving that frontal system across us through today. That is then going to clear away towards the northeast, so some heavy rain for a little while yet across some eastern, northeastern parts, but eventually turning drier here as we go through the night. Also some clear skies. Further west, though, plenty of showers piling their way in and some blustery winds, keeping temperatures here from dropping too low, but under the clearer skies and the slightly lighter winds in the east, it could turn a little fresh for some of us. Single figures in a few places, even some towns and cities. Then as we start tomorrow morning, well, it's going to be quite wet across much of Scotland. Eastern areas, Aberdeenshire, for example, avoiding the most of the showery rain, but elsewhere a pretty wet picture first thing. Also plenty of showers across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly western parts of northern England and down the western side of England, Wales, and also along some southern coastal parts. Plenty of showers here, and all the time some of these could be heavy and they could be thundering. Now, some places towards the east will start the day largely fine and dry, but as we go through into the afternoon, the showers are going to become more widespread, so most places likely to see a fair few of them, though they will be quite scattered, so some dry sunny spells in between. And in the shelter from the blustery winds, if you catch any of those sunny spells, well, it's not going to feel too bad. Temperatures getting into the high teens or low 20s. Then through into Friday, and a quieter start perhaps, but again we are going to see more showers coming in from the west, perhaps slightly fewer, less intense showers than we're going to see through tomorrow, but nonetheless most of us likely to see some. More showers come Saturday, but on Sunday there's a potential for a particularly deep low to come close to the UK. We'll firm up on the details nearer the time.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Now, as we go through the rest of today, overnight and into tomorrow, the heaviest, most persistent rain will clear away, but there will be plenty of showers following in behind. All the unsettled weather is due to an area of low pressure to the northwest of the country, and it's this that's been driving that frontal system across us through today. That is then going to clear away towards the northeast, so some heavy rain for a little while yet across some eastern northeastern parts, but eventually turning drier here as we go through the night. Also some clear skies. Further west though, plenty of showers piling their way in and some blustery winds, keeping temperatures here from dropping too low. But under the clearer skies and the slightly lighter winds in the east, it could turn a little fresh for some of us. Single figures in a few places, even some towns and cities. Then as we start tomorrow morning, well, it's going to be quite wet across much of Scotland. Eastern areas, Aberdeenshire, for example, avoiding the most of the showery rain, but elsewhere a pretty wet pitch at first thing. Also plenty of showers across parts of Northern Ireland, particularly western parts of northern England and down the western side of England, Wales, and also along some southern coastal parts. Plenty of showers here, and all the time some of these could be heavy and they could be thundering. Now, some places towards the east will start the day largely fine and dry, but as we go through into the afternoon, the showers are going to become more widespread, so most places likely to see a fair few of them, though they will be quite scattered, so some dry sunny spells in between. And in the shelter from the blustery winds, if you catch any of those sunny spells, well, it's not going to feel too bad. Temperatures getting into the high teens or low 20s. Then through into Friday, and a quieter start perhaps, but again we are going to see more showers coming in from the west, perhaps slightly fewer, less intense showers than we're going to see through tomorrow, but nonetheless most of us likely to see some. More showers come Saturday, but on Sunday there's a potential for a particularly deep low to come close to the UK. We'll firm up on the details nearer the time.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's Newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to this 2-hour special on immigration, both legal and illegal, because these really have become the issue in British politics. We will have an exclusive on the ECHR and the Prime Minister's position on this as a young man. We'll talk about the fact that 850 people have crossed the English Channel over the course of the last 24 hours. And we'll have a look at America and see what Trump's done to stop